Welcome to Artificial Breakdown, live at Inventures 2025. Let's get innovative.
Okay. Welcome to Artificial Breakdown. We are live at Inventures.
Right.
Woo!
That's exciting.
It's our very first live podcast ever, which is very exciting. And I think all the tech is working.
Yeah. You're lucky to be our guinea pigs in this situation.
So we have Brown Eagle Belanger and Ethan Clark, both from Nationsfirst. And we are so excited to have you guys here. You were one of my first picks, and they were like, "Who do you want to have on the podcast?" I was like, "These guys."
Honored.
So I'm really pumped. And I guess to kick off, why don't we start with you? Because you, or one of you, is a founder.
Correct.
Yes. Sorry. So why don't we talk about how did Nationsfirst kind of come to be?
Yeah. So Nationsfirst came to be. So I have a background. I myself am Coast Salish, Slalom, Choyets, and Douglas Treaty descendant, and so it's a pretty unique sort of piece of like time in Indigenous history was the signing of Douglas treaties, and my people had very distinct governance structures. We were sort of one of the only patrilineal and patriarchal Indigenous societies, and we had this piece of land on southern Vancouver Island, and very deep oceans, which of course we used for fishing, and the military saw that. The Department of National Defense saw that and said, "Wow, that would be an amazing place for our ships."
Wow.
Of course.
So my great grandfather, Hiaquatra at the time, who was the CM, the spokesperson, the headsman, or the kind of hereditary chief, if you will, he had him and his wife, Yatsu, and of course we followed through the father's side in our culture. It was Yatsu, I believe, and they had a bunch of children, including my grandmother. My great grandmother, her great grandfather, Jasper Charles Tsui. Around that time, where he was sort of passing on the reins to Jasper, and the Indian Act was being implemented, and there was some tragic accident in our ships. All of our men died. It was a very vulnerable time for our people, and we were sort of my sort of ancestors were the only ones that really survived from that. Of course, there was the smallpox and the residential schools and the Indian hospitals and all these sorts of things that were coming in. And actually, at that time, the Spanish were coming in and saying that what they first noticed was bodies lining the shore, because so many people had lost their lives at that time. And that was just before contact. Our people were barely in contact, and so it was a very difficult time for our people, and essentially we got wiped off of the map. And of course, the Department of National Defense built all the land around us to remove us. They built gates, and they forcefully removed us. And my great grandfather, Jasper Tsui, he sued them. Is the equivalent of $24 million. Of course, he wasn't allowed to have a lawyer at the time, just because of the Indian Act. And so he got a priest to represent him in court. And they won. They won about, what was the equivalent to that, $28 million. Yeah, for loss of use of the land. But he leaves the court case, him and his wife and his friend and his wife were celebrating. And they were driving, and he gets run off of the road by a drunk driver.
When was this?
This was in about 1948, 56, somewhere in between there. Who just happens to be an employee of the Department of National Defense, killing him. And of course, his family was displaced, and our people were basically eradicated Our language was gone, our people were gone, our governance structures were gone, our lineage of leadership was gone. And so years ago, when I found I was going to be a father, I said, I'm going to move back and I'm going to go back and take my land. And that's what I did. I went there, I figured out an acre, probably 4 acres of land, and just said, this is home.
Wow.
And really ingrained myself into this culture. Went into the bakehouse every day, did everything that I, to sort of support that, and really just learned the thing that I'd always kind of been in the bakehouse as a kid, but never really entrenched in it like that. And the governance aspect was what really caught my attention, and just the way that we had our own economic systems, we had our own governance structures, we had our ways of living with the land, and it was all there, and it was all alive in the bakehouse. But once you leave it, it was gone. And it's the Indian Act, it's governance, it's corruption, it's all these things. And I remembered way back when I was doing the whole sort of Ethereum and mining and trading of other altcoins and buying Bitcoin. I just kind of remember the technology. It didn't have much of a utility back then from what I remember, but
just kind of something interesting to be a part of.
Yeah, and I thought, well, we need our own value systems. We need to manage our own data and own our own data. We need all of these things that this technology really embodies in order to bring that sort of bakehouse culture, that value system, that literal ledger that we have in the bakehouse, and we need to bring that back into our communities. And so, thought, how do we bring this? This is a huge, this is something that's new. It's disruptive, and it's difficult to innovate into people's lives, especially our communities where people are living off of $400 a month. They don't have internet, they don't have laptops, they don't have cell phones. Oftentimes, there isn't a whole lot of opportunity, and so we said, all right, let's create a bank. Let's create a decentralized bank.
Interesting.
Yeah. And, start promoting community ownership of our assets and of our monies and oversight and that sort of thing. And, we did that, and the margins were just not there, and it didn't work. Unfortunately, the problem that we were solving which is a huge problem, 50% of our people are either unbanked or underbanked. This is how we met, because I'm like, I need co-conspirators here at the table to do this.
Yeah, so how did you get involved with Nationsfirst?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been in blockchain space for 7 years now. Come from more of a community perspective level to it. And, I attempted to create my own blockchain startup, Ecolinus Capital. Being a 60s group survivor, born into, these systems, I really understood their operational efficiencies. I was literally one of the kids that wasn't able to succeed because there was not enough funding or understaffed or just typical social gaps in the systems, right? Mm-hmm. So then it led me to obviously living more, darker experiences in life and really living that Indigenous life, right? And getting out of, that lifestyle, getting to become a leader in the community through psychology, getting my Indigenous studies through getting a psychology degree. And I really noticed a lot of social gaps within Indigenous communities and financial gaps because they're going up money mart rather than getting a bank account.
Right.
And so these are predatory services because they hold their value against you to receive any value. So I saw that and I was like, man, blockchain can really solve that with the special properties that it holds, right? Especially with AI as well. And so I attempted to create my own blockchain startup and really address this, right? And create digital ID. And that led me to tokenization more, right? And to be able to specialize in tokenization. And so I grew up in a space or providing the technology, the education, just those conversations, really trying to plant the seeds. It's an open source protocol with this financial revolution. We have Indigenous people, I feel like we have a pedal to push now. And so we're able to create our fundamental infrastructure. And that's how I met with Ethan. And he had, big big vision. And I was like, that's ABCs to me. I love this. Right?
Yeah.
It'd be crazy to do like
I
this.
can see
right?
how those would mesh well. Yeah.
Absolutely. So
when we came across each other, I'm like, wow, we are like the same person,
100%.
same background, same vision, same. It clicked. It was great.
Yeah, you can tell it's very similar passions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one question that just springs to mind immediately, because you mentioned like access to technology limited and all that, and then you're talking about a blockchain bank. Look, blockchain to me is, as a user, extremely complicated to the point where I have crypto somewhere that I can't access because I lost my encryption codes and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
how do you balance that with the
All
community?
component of a story for sure. So I think it's I think there's obviously with the crypto wallet, for example, there's what 60 million reported users in Canada, over 40 million people. Like that doesn't make sense. I mean, I can look at myself and I have about at least 6 wallets in my phone, and I'm not much of a crypto user, as most of at least within the general crypto market. And I think it's the same story for a lot of people. And people get into the hype of it and make all these wallets and do all this stuff, but the usability is just not there, and the real world application is just not yet there. And so this is where it becomes interesting, sort of the overlap between blockchain and AI. There is a learning gap. There is an area within blockchain that is difficult to understand. There is hand-holding that actually needs to be done with how the technology operates today. And so what we've been really doing, and that's kind of the pivot that we took, was what is a large enough problem to address with a large enough market that is something that people can just get with, just understand. And so that was the resource market for our people. We are so impacted by, the critical minerals and metals and just the general natural resource industry and energy industry and all of these sorts of things. They happen within our lands. Just globally, we control about or manage at least 25% of the world's landmass. We protect over 80% of the world's biodiversity, and that is a big responsibility.
Absolutely.
And there is so much going against that today. And what these industries rely on, what they bet on is the fact that we're not going to be educated enough, and we're not going to have the capacity in order to make the right decisions. And so that's where I find there's a huge opportunity to really combine these technologies. So what we do is we gather all this data around resources and all these nature-based assets. So things that people would invest into, gold, copper is what we're doing right now. We're also looking at other things like energy infrastructure. We do housing. We do all these different sort of land-based developments, and then combine that with all the data around the biodiversity, the carbon, the soil, the water, and make that one investable, fractionalized asset. Not only can people invest into that, but the communities can actually interact with that data, ask questions around that data to see what is the real impact of this industry on our community, right?
Wow.
And not only that, but we gather all of this data around what is the value of a fish versus a salmon versus $1, right? It's going to be different in every community. I can say that, a moose in my community is nothing. We don't have moose, but we have a lot of salmon, and we rely on salmon, and we've had some big impacts. I can go out and I catch 25 salmon a day, but all of a sudden the whale watching boats come around, sterile full of the orcas. The orcas are gone. The seals overpopulate, eat all the salmon. Now I can't catch one single fish. And I'm out for the entire day, right? Creates, again, we're $400 monthly sort of income in our community, right? We rely on that salmon, right? Mm-hmm. So what we've been developing, it's kind of early stages, is these valuation models, using AI, using LLMs, of actually putting value based on the community's feedback to understand how to better develop our economies that are actually based off of that, that are very place-based. And just interacting with that data in general, being able to ask these sorts of questions and not have these consultants come in and tell you what's what and give you your few options and what you can do. And you don't give any of the information. We talk about free prior informed consent so much in our communities, but it's, it's not free. It's not informed. It's the prior is like the day before the decision is made. And I don't know where the consent comes in. It's
Right.
These are bigger opportunities to really gather that data and give it back to the community so they can really make these decisions and guide them through the use of the technologies.
I love that idea of just having that education and having that information available for people, so that when somebody comes in and says, "Here's what we're going to do," somebody's not just like, "I guess." That's what's going to happen. It's like, no, this is the reality of the situation, and I'm aware of it, and you're aware of it. Let's talk about it.
I have been yelled at by these lawyers and consultants for asking the wrong questions to them in our community meetings. We have not had a community meeting in 20 years.
Oh, right.
In my town. 20 years.
Right.
The only time they did it, which was not even technically legally a community meeting, was when they went in, they set up the whole system, put everybody on the stage, which was all the, kind of key folks and lawyers and blah, 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 around a treaty process system that I'm fighting very hard right now. And there was no open mic. You were not allowed to ask questions.
Really?
It was, it's like, there's no way to know what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Unless you're going and looking for it and making it known to yourself.
Yeah.
And it's probably pretty hard if they're trying to hide it.
It can be dangerous.
Yeah.
It can be dangerous. I mean, there's one kind of funny story I always like to refer to. My father's been a big fighter in the political space and even within our own community. And one day he goes in, we have the data room, just, in the band office, so just stacks of papers, right? Nobody's looked at, collecting dust. So he goes in there trying to audit the community. And one of the certain leadership's brothers was walking around with a whetstone and a buck knife, just circling, transparency.
Not threatening at all.
Yeah.
So we're using AI obviously to do a lot of this, and like even the historic data, like those papers, is all that coming in as well, or and then you're using that to find patterns and bring it all together. How is working with AI? Who's doing that, and how are you finding that? We mentioned a little bit of bias within AI, especially around the community too. So your experiences working with that, how has that been?
I think it's like that's why we built it from the ground up. Mm-hmm. We built it. We didn't go on.
So you're not connected to any other AI systems. You're just using your data.
Entirely our own data, entirely our own network, everything.
Wow.
Fundamental infrastructure.
That's so much work.
It is. Everybody says I'm crazy. Everybody says it's a horrible idea and go build on top of this or that or whatever.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It's like, no, our people value data sovereignty. Mm-hmm. Right? We have different systems. We have different knowledge systems. We have different economic systems. We don't want to. We've had enough assimilation.
Well, and there is these inherent biases, and all of the the ChatGPTs, the Claudes, the everything.
Yeah.
So now, regardless of anything that's created, it's going to have a bias, but now at least this has your bias. You know what I mean? It has bias in the right direction.
It's funny, when we were prototyping Nationsfirst way back when, I was doing these trying to do these listings on our marketplace thing. I'm asking, make 20 names for Indigenous resource projects, and it's like cheap feather resources. What?
Yeah.
Tone it down.
Yeah, that's your prompt. Bring it down about 10 levels. Oh my god.
Oh, crazy. So, Brown, back to you. So you've been involved, how many years now?
7 years now. Yeah.
7 years. And what's a day in the life for you now? like as far as your role in the whole organization?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm really focused on the educational part right now, taking the lead on that initiative. We actually gone so far to partner with a project called Cerebro. They're an educational platform. So they provided a curriculum within DAOs, blockchains, and AI. And so I'm taking the lead on becoming the one to teach that with students across North America.
Right.
And so I've been kind of prepping on, created 6 modules for these individuals, being recognized by the Manitoba government, WACU as well.
Right.
And be able to like really give them the knowledge, just the basic fundamental skills, how to operate in the space, rather than how to buy a token, right? Like how to be able to just be empowered, how to be able to create a DAO through a governance,
Right.
be able to manage your assets, right?
Yeah.
How to do that in a very compliant way as well, right? Same thing with AI, but to be able to understand the context of bodies, but to understand what to ask for. I tell them all the time, like, be imaginative, right? Like always ask why, what about this, what about that? Like when you're a kid, right? Like you always asking all these questions, but when we grow up, our imagination kind of narrows down, right? So with tokenization and with AI, the whole world's your playground, right? So I really give on a community level, governance level, even corporate, or even just like plain old blockchain perspective, right?
Right.
A lot of people get misconstrued about, I would say the compliant capital world towards the non-compliant capital world. We focus on the non-compliant capital world. What is that? That's securing assets to Bitcoin, public blockchains, right? And you're able to facilitate that in a compliant way through transaction, and it works, right?
Right.
He's on the same chain, I'm on the same chain. We just send a token, that's it, right? But with a compliant world, which is Web 2, it's a lot more complex, right?
Yeah.
Identification systems, legacy integration systems, standards, right? So how do you make that fit and flow on chain? Right?
Yeah, and how do you teach that?
Yeah, I was going to ask, like you probably have a wide spectrum of people who are technology advanced. How is the training going?
It's going good. Like I get a lot of great questions, a lot of great feedback. Mostly Indigenous people too. I like to really do that and focus on the life experience that we actually recognize, right? Which is systematic suppression, the Indian Act, resources, obviously internal issues with chief and council. So stuff that really makes sense to them, right? How does it look like when we remove, Web 2 financial institutions that are intermediaries for our resources or something like that, right? We can actually be peer-to-peer, wallet to wallet, and it's a lot more cost effective too, right? So transparency, accountability, and to be able to govern our own resources, our own way of eligibility, accountability, right? So, yeah.
Right. And then, speaking of resources, we kind of touched on this obviously before, but something that Peter and I talked about on the podcast before is just the mass amount of resources that are being used by, these huge data centers. Every time you said thank you to ChatGPT, it used some amount of water, and it's like, it's just devastating, but it's also these tools are so important.
Yeah.
So, you spoke about that earlier. So how do you kind of rationalize all of that?
Yeah. So I think it's to the point, and that's a component of the course, right? That we're doing. It's on decentralized finance, decentralized governance, and AI prompt engineering. Things like the thank you. I think we're all might be a little worried that someday.
There's a reason you say thank you.
Yeah, I remember starting off when I was like, I think I had like when it first kind of came out, and then you're like, I don't really want to use this thing, but I'm going to, and I'm going to be nice to it because I don't really know what this is yet. I hope we can move beyond that Skynet sort of view of, So the prompt engineering course, I think, can make things a lot more efficient for people, just to be better in the way that they ask these questions, in the way that they utilize this. And as per the technology, I think there is at a certain point where it's just clunky and not quite as efficient as it could be, but it's also quite interesting if it's developed in the right way that it'll over time become more efficient, more energy efficient, more water efficient, and it will sort of serve itself in that way, right? Where I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think it's just about having the right people at the table, and also supply chain, right? Understanding where all of the minerals are coming from to build these data centers.
Right.
There's, of course, like our communities are subject to that. As I mentioned, like, there's estimated 480 million Indigenous people around the world. And in places you never even think of. Like a quarter of that is in China.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm learning so much.
And like places like Indonesia and India, and it's quite fascinating. But all these places that are subject to these to mineral exploration, mineral extraction, all that sort of stuff. And so for our communities to onboard into this technology, there's a big component of what effect is it having on our other peoples, even if that's not in our own communities. We're all connected, right? And ensuring that we're able to, responsibly develop this technology and, responsibly develop the infrastructure, and that sort of compute. So, there's a component of that where I think it, as long as it's led by the right people and with the right intentions and the supply chain is tracked, and the companies that are, extracting those resources are held accountable back to the actual communities, which is sort of where we come in, right? We come in, the people that are going to be subject to the long-term effects of the land are, of course, going to take better care of it.
Right.
And that's, we always talk about the whole 7 generations thing, and 25 years of generation, we have to think 175 years ahead, right? What is the long-term effect of the actual infrastructure to do this, and is it worth it? And how do we make sure that it is? Because I'm a big believer in technology. I think this will solve a lot of problems. I think most of the world's big problems come down to transparency and governance. And so I think decentralizing it has always just been a lot more efficient.
It feels like, hard to predict the future, especially right now with AI just moving as quickly as it has. But fast forward a little bit, like you mentioned a little bit, but let's say all your hopes and dreams come true. What does the future look like? Can you paint a little bit of a picture? If this really takes hold, what does that look like across the world in some ways?
I think that's why Nationsfirst exists, to ensure the communities don't get left behind, right? But not just that, to empower them, right?
I think not even to get left behind to lead, right? Because I think for a long time we've been left behind in the way that we are almost assimilated into these things. We see not to knock them, but we see a lot of groups like, Indigenous companies doing these legacy industries, and the big thing is IPOing. That doesn't really serve us, right? It's not really serving our interests. It's not really rooted in our systems. And so, I think that there is a big sort of restructuring and bringing it back to sort of our people and empowering those 480 million plus Indigenous peoples to actually govern and invest into these developments.
Such an amazing way to think about it, just as far as create your own versus leveraging other things that already exist. It feels like this is the right time with technology too. The ability to disrupt is so high, and you have these tools that you can bring together to build this thing. And finance is such a big pillar of this stuff, right? That no matter what, up to this point, you're going to be having to lean on something else. So that's exciting.
Yeah, but trust is being increasingly automated now, right? And then the way internet is before with Web 2, you have access to information. But with blockchain, it's reconstruction, the way you have that access of information and the exchange of value, right? So with that said, Nationsfirst is able to reconstruct governance and sovereignty, right? So that's why we're building fundamental infrastructure for them to be able to lead as well.
Wow.
If that makes sense.
And that's totally. which is funny because I don't understand anything about blockchain, but you're really making it make sense. But what I really love to see is that, instead of seeing these tools and being like, oh, these are scary and they could hurt us, that it's, seeing what they can possibly do. And then, like you said, even if they're not really efficient now, and even if they're not great now, they can themselves help become more sustainable and help become better and help build this future that you're imagining. Yeah.
And there's a lot of our people that are scared of it, right? This is why I was in a call this morning. It's like, well, my 78 grandmother. Oh, I'm not a 78-year-old grandmother. I'm not expecting your 78-year-old grandmother to utilize it. But we have such a young population. Like half of our people are under the age of 35. We are the fastest growing population in Canada. And it is the same in States, in Australia, and all the other countries with Indigenous peoples.
Right.
And so more and more and more of our people are using these tools. I mean, they're being born with these tools.
Yeah, you can't not have them in your life.
And so, it is sort of becoming less scary, I think, for a lot of our people. And I think it's just about empowering them with the tools to actually build it themselves to ensure that they're really leading it. Which is why I just think that, like, AI and blockchain just fit so well together, and ensuring that it's not the big, multi, $70-billion market cap companies that are determining how these technologies are used, where they're being stored, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And getting a hold of every single bit of it.
Yeah.
There's plenty to go around.
Yeah.
Early still.
Yeah, exactly. And which is the best time to, break into it and start doing what you guys are doing. And instead of saying, oh, well, we'll figure it out when everybody else figures it out. It's like, no, we need to be a part of this so that we know it grows in a better way.
Yeah. And that was, like I mentioned, we built it from the ground up. And it was really we have to set a foundation right. We really have to set a foundation right. Otherwise, how will we scale into anything meaningful?
Totally.
How big is is a company you're building, Nationsfirst, how big is it?
It's about 22 people.
22 people, amazing.
We're on our funny second person.
And then you're kind of all across.
Across Canada,
Yeah.
And Toronto, Calgary, one of them in the Sound. Now he's back in Chile.
So we have one guy in Chile.
International.
And I'm assuming it's comprised of developers and financial experts, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so it's about half dev team, and then the other half is sort of more into the finance, politics, resource projects.
Wow.
Really hyper focused on like the cultural framework and how we're leading into these communities. We're not just a transactional relationship, right? So we're very in those relationships.
It's a big shift that you're making, right? Not just, like you said, it's not just where you're going to withdraw your money from. It's going to be how you think about everything. So that's exciting. How do people find out more about this? Is there a site or anything like that?
Yeah. So, we have the Nationsfirst.io. We're on LinkedIn, Nationsfirst. We're on, Twitter, X. We're on YouTube. We're on all of it. We got a Discord community that Brown runs, Twitter Spaces that Brown runs. We have the course, so we offer that for free for Indigenous peoples and
And they can find that on your website.
They can find it on our website. And then we're all over. We're happy to meet with people and chat. I'm all over the place. We'll be at the One Summit coming up in May 27th to the 30th.
This is Vancouver.
Yeah. So we'll be speaking at that. Pretty much our whole team will be there. Other than our dev team about the shadows.
Some of those too.
We'll bring one, you never trust a booth that doesn't have a guy sitting on the floor with a laptop. You guys are not legit.
Yesterday was on the floor. Okay, so here at Inventures, you're both speaking?
Yes.
Separately together?
Separately.
And what are you speaking on?
I'll be speaking on DeFi into TradFi, how it brings financial inclusion.
Whoa, that sounds so futuristic.
It's cool. I have this job in legacy industries.
Also cool.
It's cool. It's cool. Yeah.
To add on to the educational component too, we do offer employment, Web3 employment as well. So once it starts July 1st, we're aiming for that. So yeah, sign up, immediately, and we do offer employment through the Solana blockchain super team. So there is prioritize once you guys do get that 6-week course.
Cool.
So,
That's awesome. Well, Brown Eagle, Ethan Clark, thanks for taking the time out of your busy couple days. I know that you typically like to be prepping for your talks, so
this is a good prep right here.
no, we appreciate it. So thank you very much for being on.
For sure.
Thank you for having us. It's great.
That's a wrap for today's breakdown. If you have any thoughts or questions, drop us a comment or message us on social media. If you enjoyed today's chat, why not subscribe so you don't miss another episode? Thanks for tuning in. Stay charged out there.